Welcome to Great Military Battles. Today we explore a brutal and transformative conflict that followed the collapse of an empire and redrew the map of the Eastern Mediterranean. The greco-turkish War of 1919 to 1922. A war of dreams, disasters, and nation-building. To understand why Greece and Turkey went to war, we need to rewind to the end of World War I. The once mighty Ottoman Empire, often called the sick man of Europe, had just been defeated after joining the Central Powers. By 1918, its control over the Middle East and much of its heartland was in tatters. Allied forces occupied Istanbul, and parts of Anatolia were divided up under Allied occupation zones. Into this chaos stepped Greece, guided by Prime Minister Eleftheros Venizelos. Greece had entered the war on the side of the Allies and saw victory as a golden opportunity. Venizelos envisioned the Megali idea, the great idea, a nationalist dream to restore Greek lands once held by the Byzantine Empire. This included Western Anatolia, where hundreds of thousands of ethnic Greeks had lived for centuries. With support from Britain, especially from Prime Minister David Lloyd George, who distrusted the Italians and wanted a pro-Western buffer in the east. Greece was given permission to land troops in Smyrna, modern-day Izmir, in May 1919, supposedly to protect Christian minorities. But this wasn't a peacekeeping mission. This was a military occupation, and it was the spark that ignited full-scale war. On May 15, 1919, Greek troops landed in Smyrna. Almost immediately, violence erupted. Greek soldiers fired on a Turkish crowd, killing and wounding dozens, fueling resentment and outrage across Anatolia. In response, Mustafa Kemal Pasha, later known as Ataturk, a highly respected Ottoman officer, landed in Samsun just days later, on May 19, 1919. His mission, originally approved by the Ottoman government, was to oversee disarmament. But instead he began organizing a national resistance movement. In Sivas and Erzurum, Kemal held congresses, rallying support for an independent Turkish state. He rejected the authority of the puppet Ottoman Sultan in occupied Istanbul and set up a rival Ankara-based government. Meanwhile, the Greeks pushed deeper into Anatolia. In 1920, they captured Aydın, Manisa, and Bursa, extending their control over most of western Anatolia. The Allies approved the Treaty of Sèvres, which officially dismembered the Ottoman Empire and gave Greece sovereignty over Smyrna. Though the final annexation was to come later via plebiscite. But the treaty was never accepted by the Turks. Instead, they were preparing for war. In early 1921, the Greek army launched a full-scale offensive into the interior of Anatolia. Their goal: capture Ankara and destroy the Turkish nationalist movement at its heart. They won battles at İnönü, but couldn't deliver a knockout blow. In July 1921, the Greeks advanced once more, marching through central Anatolia. But their supply lines were stretched thin, and the summer heat made logistics a nightmare. Then came the Battle of Sakarya, fought from August 23rd to September 13th, 1921. It was a defining moment. Ataturk took personal command of the front. His now well-organized Turkish nationalist army held a strong defensive line along the Sakarya River, just 80 kilometers from Ankara. The fighting was brutal. Over 100,000 troops on each side, thousands of casualties. But the Greeks couldn't break through. After weeks of costly assaults, they began to retreat. Ataturk's famous words echoed. There is no line of defense, but a surface of defense, and that surface is the entire homeland. By mid-1922, the Greek army was exhausted, politically unsupported, and dangerously overextended. Meanwhile, the Turks had regrouped, resupplied, and were ready to strike. On August 26, 1922, the Turkish army launched the Great Offensive, a lightning-fast campaign known as the Battle of Dumlupınar. In less than 2 weeks, they shattered Greek lines and began chasing them all the way back to the coast. By September 9th, Turkish forces entered Smyrna, greeted as liberators by Turkish residents, and with dread by the Greek and Armenian populations. Just days later, on September 13th, a catastrophic fire engulfed Smyrna. Entire Greek and Armenian quarters were consumed. Tens of thousands fled to the waterfront, hoping for Allied ships to rescue them. It remains one of the most controversial and tragic episodes of the war. Historians still debate who started the fire, but the result was clear. One of the worst humanitarian disasters of the 20th century. The war ended in total defeat for Greece and total victory for Turkish nationalists. The Treaty of Sèvres was scrapped, and in 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne was signed. It recognized the sovereignty of the Republic of Turkey, with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk as its founding leader. For Greece, it was a national catastrophe. Over 9,000 soldiers killed, thousands more missing or captured. The war triggered the Asia Minor catastrophe, leading to the collapse of Venizelos's political movement and deep divisions in Greek society. But the human cost was even more staggering. As part of the Lausanne Treaty, the two nations agreed to a compulsory population exchange based on religion. 1.5 million Greeks, many of whom had lived in Anatolia for generations, were expelled from Turkey. In return, 500,000 Muslims were forced to leave Greece and resettle in Turkey. A massive upheaval. Ancient communities vanished. Cities changed forever. The greco-turkish war marked the final act of the Ottoman Empire and the violent birth of modern Turkey. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk would go on to lead one of the most radical modernization programs in history, abolishing the Sultanate, the Caliphate, and transforming Turkey into a secular republic. For Greece, the war ended its dream of a greater Greece. But it also forced the nation to redefine itself, geographically, politically, and culturally, within its modern borders. The war left wounds that still shape Greek-Turkish relations to this day, over Cyprus, Aegean borders, and minority rights. The Greco-Turkish War of 1919 to 1922 was more than a military conflict. It was a clash of empires, identities, and national dreams. If you found this deep dive into one of history's pivotal conflicts fascinating, help us grow by hitting like, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. What war or battle would you like us to cover next? Let us know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching Great Military Battles.